Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today.
It just doesn't make sense. They don't care about bravado. They don't care about ego. They want their moms and dads to be safe. And there's a big reason for that, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'm sure that you and many of my fellow members here notice that I'm not just wearing one mask, I'm wearing two masks. And I'll be doing that every time I enter this building. And the reason for that is that I am an immune-compromised person. The recent changes in my health status are deeply personal, but it's something that's given me a new perspective on what the last year has been like for other folks who are at greater risk of contracting COVID-19. I want to thank the members opposite who choose to wear their masks in here. I see it, I notice it, and I think that's important. What message does it send for those who are choosing otherwise? What message does it send to the people of Saskatchewan when leaders in government don't lead by example? What message does it send when cabinet ministers go on warm vacations during the holidays while everyone else is required to stay home?
That was NDP MLA for Saskatchewan being laughed at for being immunocompromised. So, for those unaware, the Saskatchewan Party is basically a union of the Liberal and Conservative parties in Saskatchewan because the NDP, the actual left-wing party, was being competitive and able to get elected at several points in time. So they realized, oh, look, we're splitting the vote, and oh, the NDP, that can't be allowed. So they teamed up, they formed the Saskatchewan Party, and it's basically just a conservative party, but they claim that they're not. And this is the party that's currently in control of Saskatchewan right now. And so this NDP MLA, he's a critic and he's just speaking out about these issues. But the gall of people to laugh at someone who says they're immunocompromised should say everything that needs to be said about conservatives and how they care about moral values and life. And they actually care for, the little guy and support the working class. They're a death cult. A bunch of them gleefully laughed at someone who's immunocompromised and takes a risk to do their job in a pandemic, and they laughed at him. And many of them also flaunt mask guidelines. That's the state of conservatism, not just in Saskatchewan, but Canada at large right now. And it's very distressing, and it's definitely what's bothering me today. But it's the Sunday sum up, so we got a few more stories here. In the neighboring province of Alberta, Premier Jason Kenney, leader of the United Conservative Party, is still being derided for his gross mishandling of the pandemic. His numbers are way down, like negative 55%. But what's bothering me about Alberta today is that he and his government apparently copied line for line Wikipedia articles as part of their new and improved education curriculum. They plagiarized Wikipedia for their education content. Yeah, what's that about conservatives being hard workers and always having really good original thoughts? Please explain this then. I would love to know how that works. Jason Kenney is just so terrible in so many ways. I made a video about him and all the ways he's terrible, which probably still needs updating. He's absolutely bungled the pandemic response. He has made Alberta so much worse than it's been at any previous point in time. And he's also just been so well documented, hanging out with terrible people, racists, bigots, proudly defended the fact that he prevented gay people from seeing, their dying partners in hospital, because that's morally wrong. And there's so much more. Like I said, go check out my open rant about Jason Kenney video. But then there's also his terrible handling of the economy and, as we see here, education, basically plagiarizing it, despite saying that conservatives are hard workers. So there's that one. And then finally this week, because it was a light week, we have Prince Philip. Because, of course, he died. And, condolences to Her Majesty the Queen for losing a literal partner in crime. You know, I get it. But the problem is that we're seeing a lot of pieces from Prince Philip that are trying to humanize him, including this really weird piece in the Toronto Star that tries to paint him as a feminist, which Prince Philip was many things, and a feminist he was not. In fact, he was a salty little bitch about not being able to give his last name of Mountbatten to the royal name. He was quite angry that, I'm the only man who can give his own name to his own children. That reeks of, old world patriarchy and misogyny, am I right? So that's one aspect of that. Never mind his, no filter, very racist words that were often said, and very insulting words that were said to people that he had to meet at his many, openings. Oh, wow, look, he's so good at opening things. Yeah, and then he goes and insults several people like 2 minutes later. Seems like a real stand-up guy. I get that people, don't want to speak ill of the dead, but Prince Philip was by no means this kind of good and magnanimous person that some of these pieces are trying to make him out to be. Was he important to his family? Yes, I have no doubt that Her Majesty the Queen and his children are grieving the loss in some way. But at the same time, let's not try and pretend like he was a saint, because he really wasn't. It's so silly. It is so silly. But anyway, I'm still just not over the fact that during a pandemic, and while several of them flaunt the mask regulations, that people sitting politicians in a provincial legislative assembly had the audacity to laugh at one of their fellow coworkers who is immunocompromised. That is beyond bothersome. That is disgusting, and it's infuriating. And it should be infuriating to all other Canadians. But unfortunately, there's about 30% of us who do not feel that way. There's 30% of Canadians who do not care for their fellow man and do not care for decency and respect and democracy, despite claiming that they do so. And the fact that this 30% of Canadians exist and we have to live and work with these people during the course of a pandemic that a bunch of them don't believe is real and that others think, is just an excuse for callousness, that's what's bothering me today.